China wasted no time announcing its own response to new tariffs from the United States. It will impose extra levies of 15% on American chicken, wheat, corn, and cotton, while soybeans, sorghum, pork, beef, fruits, vegetables, and seafood will receive an added 10%. It's also added 25 American companies to its export and investment control lists, restricting their ability to do business in the country, and says it will sue the US at the World Trade Organization.
The trade tensions between the United States and China have been a defining feature of global economic relations in recent years. Originating during President Donald Trump's first term, these tensions have evolved into a complex trade war, with both nations implementing a series of tariffs and countermeasures that have reshaped international trade dynamics. Following Trump's aggressive tariffs policy, Beijing has clarified that it is prepared to counterattack the U.S. trade war, a declaration that carries profound implications for global markets, national industries, and international diplomacy.
We will never accept pressure and threats, and will resolutely safeguard our national sovereignty, security, and development interests.
The announcement came hours after the Trump administration imposed an extra 10% tariff on Chinese goods, doubling the duties since February.
The seeds of this ongoing conflict were sown during President Trump's first term in office. Trump's administration argued that China had engaged in unfair trade practices, accusations that included intellectual property theft, forced technology transfers, and state subsidies that gave Chinese companies an undue competitive advantage. In a bid to correct what he described as an imbalanced trade relationship, Trump imposed steep tariffs on hundreds of billions of dollars worth of Chinese imports. These measures were intended to protect American jobs, bolster domestic manufacturing, and compelled China to reform its trading practices. At the time, these tariffs marked a radical departure from the long-held American policy of free trade and open markets. Critics argued that such protectionist measures risked not only triggering a tit-for-tat retaliation, but also destabilizing global supply chains. Nonetheless, the tariffs set in motion a chain reaction. Chinese exporters found their products increasingly less competitive in the U.S. market, and in response, Beijing retaliated with its own series of tariffs targeting U.S. goods, especially agricultural products, which had long been a cornerstone of American exports to China.
From the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the response today, it's a lot more pointed than we've heard even just days ago. Take a listen to some of the remarks we heard just earlier today here from Beijing.
If the U.S. has ulterior motives and insists on waging a tariff war, trade war, or any other kind of war, China will fight the U.S. till the end. We advise the U.S. to put away its bullying face and return to the right track of dialogue and cooperation before it is too late.
During the following years, as the trade war intensified, the Trump administration and China engaged in a series of high-stakes negotiations. The back and forth eventually led to what became known as the Phase 1 deal. Under this agreement, China pledged to increase its purchases of American goods by approximately $200 billion over 2 years, a promise that many viewed as a symbolic gesture aimed at diffusing tensions rather than a substantive solution. While some sectors like agriculture saw modest improvements in export volumes, analysts noted that China ultimately fell short of its purchase commitments. The lingering discontent on both sides underscored a deeper structural conflict in the trade relationship, setting the stage for future escalation. Following his controversial re-election, President Trump's second term, sometimes referred to as Trump 2.0, has seen a dramatic escalation of the trade conflict. Determined to further counter what he views as China's growing economic dominance, the administration implemented a series of aggressive measures. On March 3, 2025, Trump imposed new tariffs of 25% on imports from Mexico and Canada, while simultaneously increasing tariffs on Chinese goods. The duty on Chinese products was raised from 10% to an eye-popping 20%, marking a significant intensification of the trade war. These new tariffs are part of a broader U.S. strategy aimed at curtailing China's economic influence. The administration's rhetoric is blunt. By raising tariffs and imposing additional trade restrictions, the U.S. intends not only to protect domestic industries, but also to force China into making concessions regarding technology transfers and intellectual property practices. Moreover, Trump has linked these tariff policies to other domestic priorities, such as curbing illegal immigration and reducing the flow of chemicals used in the production of illicit drugs like fentanyl, a drug that has become a flashpoint in U.S.-China economic relations. China's response to the renewed aggression from the Trump administration has been both swift and unequivocal. In a resolute statement that captured global attention, China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs vowed to fight to the end against what it characterized as American bullying. Beijing's approach has been multifaceted, combining economic, legal, and strategic measures. One of China's primary countermeasures has been to impose additional tariffs on U.S. products. On March 4, 2025, China announced that it would levy a 15% tariff on key U.S. farm products, including chicken, wheat, corn, and cotton, effective from March 10, 2025. Additionally, China raised tariffs by 10% on other products such as sorghum, soybeans, pork, beef, aquatic products, fruits, vegetables, and dairy products. These moves are designed to hit American exporters where it hurts, particularly in agriculture, a sector that has historically suffered under previous rounds of retaliatory tariffs. At the same time, China is actively working to reduce its dependency on U.S. agricultural products by diversifying its import sources. As U.S. tariffs make American goods less competitive, Chinese buyers are increasingly turning to Latin America and Europe for supplies. For instance, pork imports from Brazil, beef from Australia, and grains from European countries are expected to see significant growth. This strategic pivot not only mitigates the impact of U.S. tariffs, but also signals China's determination to reshape global trade flows in its favor. Beyond tariffs, China is leveraging international legal mechanisms to counter U.S. actions. The country has submitted revised requests for dispute settlement consultations to the World Trade Organization, WTO, challenging the legality of the new U.S. tariffs. By invoking WTO rules, China seeks to build international support for its position and put additional pressure on the U.S. to reconsider its trade policies. Chinese authorities have also implemented measures targeting U.S. companies. For example, Beijing has expanded its unreliable entity list, adding more American firms that it claims pose a threat to China's national security. These companies now face restrictions on engaging in import or export activities with China, as well as limitations on making new investments in the country. Such regulatory actions add another layer of complexity to the trade war, affecting not only bilateral trade but also the broader global supply chains in which these companies operate. On the technological front, China is doubling down on its investments in high-tech sectors such as artificial intelligence, robotics, and semiconductor manufacturing. With the U.S. imposing export controls on key technologies and tightening restrictions on investments in strategic industries, Beijing is accelerating its push for technological self-reliance. By fostering indigenous innovation and reducing reliance on foreign technology, China aims to counter the long-term impact of U.S. trade restrictions and secure its position as a global tech leader. Beyond tariffs, both nations have employed strategic measures to bolster their positions. The U.S. has sought to reduce dependence on Chinese manufacturing by encouraging companies to diversify their supply chains, a strategy known as China Plus One. This approach aims to mitigate risks associated with over-reliance on a single country for manufacturing needs. China, on the other hand, has focused on enhancing its technological self-sufficiency. Investments in artificial intelligence, robotics, and other high-tech sectors have been prioritized to reduce reliance on U.S. technologies. This strategy aims to strengthen China's position in the global technology landscape and mitigate the impact of U.S. trade restrictions. The U.S.-China trade war has had far-reaching implications for the global economy. Investors have become increasingly cautious, leading to shifts in global markets. There is a growing sentiment to diversify investments away from the U.S., reflecting concerns over economic uncertainties stemming from aggressive trade policies. Additionally, the trade war has prompted other nations to reassess their trade strategies. Countries that have traditionally relied on China-centric supply chains are exploring alternative partnerships to mitigate risks. This realignment has the potential to reshape global trade networks and influence economic alliances in the coming years. Perhaps the most concerning prospect is the risk that the trade war could escalate beyond economic measures. Rhetoric that hints at military readiness and national security threats creates an environment of uncertainty. While both sides currently use such language primarily for deterrence, there remains a slim possibility that economic hostilities could spill over into other areas of conflict. In this scenario, global stability would be at stake, underscoring the need for careful diplomacy and effective conflict management mechanisms. For ordinary consumers, the trade war may mean higher prices on everyday goods, from smartphones and clothing to vehicles and food products. As tariffs raise the cost of imported materials and finished goods, Manufacturers are forced to pass these costs along the supply chain. This in turn could lead to a decrease in consumer spending, dampening economic growth in an already precarious global environment. The relentless back and forth of tariffs, legal challenges, and strategic countermeasures between the United States and China reflects a deep-seated struggle for economic dominance and technological leadership. From its origins in President Trump's first term, the trade war has morphed into a comprehensive strategy aimed at reshaping global trade. The recent intensification under Trump's second term, combined with China's determined counterattack, paints a picture of an increasingly polarized international order. China's vow to fight to the end is not merely a slogan. It represents a multifaceted strategy that encompasses retaliatory tariffs, a push for technological self-reliance, and efforts to diversify import sources away from the United States. On the other side, the U.S. strategy is characterized by aggressive tariffs, investment restrictions, and attempts to revitalize domestic industries through targeted economic policies. As both superpowers double down on their respective strategies, the global community finds itself at a crossroads. The long-term impact of this trade war will depend on the ability of the U.S. and China to manage their differences without allowing economic hostilities to escalate into broader conflict. In the meantime, businesses and consumers around the world brace for the ripple effects of policies that are likely to reshape the international economic landscape.